Hi there, I'm Biff Bufflington, and you might notice this video doesn't have any video per se. That's because this isn't a video to get you to watch. This is a video to get you to listen to. What I'm going to do right now, and until they tell me to stop, is read the following story, written by Mr. Stephen King, out loud and in your ear. Maybe you like it, maybe you won't. But if you've come this far, we'll see where this goes. The book is called The Gunslinger, and it is part 1 of the Dark Tower series. It's written by Stephen King. It's dedicated to Ed Furman, who took a chance on these stories, one by one. It's being read by Biff Bufflington, who's also taking a chance on these stories, one by one. Introduction. On being 19, and a few other things. Part 1. Hobbits were big when I was 19, a number of some import in the stories you were about to listen to. There were probably half a dozen Marys and Pippins slogging through the mud at Maxie Asger's farm during the Great Woodstock Music Festival, twice as many Frodos, and hippie Gandalfs without number. J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings was madly popular in those days. And while I never made it to Woodstock, say sorry, I suppose I was at least a halfling hippie, enough of one, at any rate, to have read the books and fallen in love with them. The Dark Tower books. Like most long fantasy tales written by men and women of my generation, The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant by Stephen Donaldson and The Sword of Shannara by Terry Brooks are just two of many. They were born out of Tolkien's, but although I read the books in 1966 and 1967, I held off writing. I responded, and with rather touching wholeheartedness, to the sweep of Tolkien's imagination, to the ambition of his story. But I wanted to write my own kind of story. And had I started then, I would have written his. That, as the late tricky Dick Nixon was fond of saying, would have been wrong. Thanks to Mr. Tolkien, the 20th century had all the elves and wizards it needed. In 1967, I didn't have any idea what my kind of story might be, but that didn't matter. I felt positive I'd know it when it passed me on the street. I was 19 and arrogant. Certainly arrogant enough to feel I could wait a little while on my muse and my masterpiece, as I was sure it would be. At 19, it seems to me one has a right to be arrogant. Time has usually not begun its stealthy and rotten subtractions. It takes away your hair and your jump shot, according to a popular country song, but in truth it takes away a lot more than that. I didn't know it in 1966 and 67, and if I had, I wouldn't have cared. I could imagine barely being 40, but 50? No. 60? Never. 60 was out of the question, and at 19, that's just the way to be. 19 is the age where you say, look out world, I'm smoking TNT and drinking dynamite, so if you know what's good for you, get out of my way. Here comes Biff. 19's a selfish age and finds one's cares tightly circumscribed. I had a lot of reach, and I cared about that. I had a lot of ambition, and I cared about that. I had a typewriter that I carried from one shithole apartment to the next, always with a deck of smokes in my pocket and a smile on my face. The compromises of middle age were distant. The insults of old age over the horizon. Like the protagonist in that Bob Seger song they now use to sell the trucks, I felt endlessly powerful and endlessly optimistic. My pockets were empty, but my head was full of things I wanted to say, and my heart was full of stories I wanted to tell. Sounds corny now. Felt wonderful then. Felt very cool. More than anything else, I wanted to get inside my readers' defenses. Wanted to rip them, ravish them, change them forever with nothing but story. And I felt I could do those things. I felt I had been made to do those things. How conceited does that sound? A lot? Or a little? Either way, I don't apologize. I was 19. There was not so much as a strand of gray in my beard. I had 3 pairs of jeans, 1 pair of boots. The idea that the world was my oyster and nothing that happened in the next 20 years proved me wrong. Then around the age of 39, my troubles set in. Drink, drugs, a road accident that changed the way I walked, among other things. I've written about them at length and need not write about them here. Besides, it's the same for you, right? The world eventually sends out a mean-ass patrol boy to slow your progress, show you who's boss. You, listening to this, have undoubtedly met yours, or will. I met mine, and I'm sure he'll be back. He's got my address. He's a mean guy, a bad lieutenant, the sworn enemy of goofery, fuckery, pride, ambition, loud music, and all things 19. But I still think that's a pretty fine age, maybe the best age. You can rock and roll all night, but when the music dies and the beer wears off, you're able to think and dream big dreams. The mean patrol boy cuts you down to size eventually, and if you start out small, why, there's almost nothing left but the cuffs of your pants when he's done with you. Got another one, he shouts and strides, with his citation book in hand. So a little arrogance, or even a lot, isn't such a bad thing. Although your mother undoubtedly told you different, mine did. Pride goeth before the fall, Biff, she'd say. And then I found out, right around the age that is 19 times 2, that eventually you fall down anyway, or get pushed into the ditch. At 19, they can card you in the bars and tell you to get the fuck out, put your sorry act and sorry your ass back on the street. But they can't card you when you sit down to paint a picture, or write a poem, or tell a story. By God, and if you listening to this happen to be very young, don't let your elders and supposed betters tell you any different. Sure, you've never been to Paris. No, you've never ran with the bulls at Pamplona. Yes, you're a pissant who had no hair in your armpits until 3 years ago. But so what? If you don't start out too big for your britches, how are you gonna fill them when you grow up? Let it rip regardless of what anybody tells you. That's my idea. Sit down and smoke that baby. Thanks for listening. That's part 1. If you guys like it, then I'll make part 2.